I'm a beginner artist, and this is my trick to start making my own artwork. I follow and reimagine watercolor tutorials with alcohol markers. I'll show you exactly how I do it step by step, and I will draw this koi fish pond. So here is how I'm actually doing it. So I use this art book, but the exact book isn't the important part. It's actually in German, and as far as I know, this one hasn't been translated into English, but you can use any similar book in your language. What makes this one useful for me is that it combines drawing prompts with partial step-by-step guides. This book covers different media, like watercolor, pencils, markers, and also gel pens, and it's beginner-friendly. Though, honestly, some ideas are still pretty challenging for me, like, for example, animals and some landscapes. But how do I actually use this book? As you can see, this book has more than 300 ideas what to draw and small tutorials. And this book usually shows an initial sketch, then some base color stage, then some intermediate progress, like shadows or highlights or something else, and finally, the finished result. And what I like about it, it doesn't really give you every tiny step that you need to follow, or like the exact details, or the exact color swatches. And I really enjoy it. So I think it gives enough structure to get started with an idea, but like kind of still leaves enough room for like my own, decisions and imagination and creativity. I would say that's definitely a sweet spot, for me between a strict tutorial and my own free drawing. As you can see, I already flipped through the book earlier and marked some ideas that I liked, and I actually already done quite a few pieces that way. For example, like I think I've done like a metal study, different pots. So all of them originally were watercolor tutorials, and I just recreated them with markers and like reimagined them with markers. And today, I'm going to walk you through the full process, like with a new piece, with a new picture, and I picked this lovely koi fish in a pond. It will be fun. And again, let's just double check, this tutorial in the book is indeed watercolor based. And I will be translating this into alcohol markers. So the first thing I do is I analyze each stage shown in the book. Because there are no detailed instructions between the steps, I really need to figure out what changed from one stage to the next one. Like where the shadows were added, how colors were layered, things like that. Now, let's go step by step. So what do I see here? So first stage is just the sketch. Once I understand all of the stages and have a rough idea what I need to do, I pick my marker colors. I don't find this particularly difficult, it's just a bit tedious, and that's why I already prepared mine beforehand, because no one's gonna, watch how I test and swatch colors for half an hour. I just try to find colors that match the original design. Sometimes I do change the colors depending on my mood, honestly. And today I will be using like a really smooth white paper because I really want to achieve this watercolor effect. We'll see how it goes. And now it's time to go to step 2, and that's applying the base color. I will be using the light green color. I will just cover everything, of course, not the fish. But I also want to talk about something. What actually does count as your own art? It's super clear when you come up with your idea, right, yourself, and you build it from scratch and you draw it from scratch. That's obviously your own original artwork. But what about when you follow a step-by-step tutorial? Is this really your art? Or is it something else? I think it gets even trickier with cases like this, the one that I'm doing right now. Like, I'm using someone else's idea, right? It wasn't my idea to draw this koi fish pond in this setup. But I'm not following the exact steps, right? I am working in a different medium, and I am making my own choices. And that's definitely some creative thinking happening here along the way. And obviously, it still comes out in my own style and, with my own skill level. Okay, step number 3, adding shadows. Not gonna lie, I am a bit intimidated because this is not the color combination I would typically choose, but let's give it a try. So here's how I say it. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but let's say if I follow a very detailed tutorial and I try to recreate the exact same thing, the exact same result, then the idea isn't really mine. The art creation process isn't mine either. So of course I still put in, the effort, and that's why I think it counts as a practice or a study, but I wouldn't really call it my own artwork, to be honest. I'm just not comfortable doing that. And I want to add a bit of like bright colors to the koi fish so that it stands out, and I kind of, so that I know what I'm working with. In cases like this one, of course, I'm using like a guided idea, right? So I'm refactoring an idea, but I'm still reworking it and I'm changing things and I'm working in my own medium. I'm more comfortable calling it my own artwork. Maybe I would say, and rightfully so, that it was inspired by someone else. And, the core idea is not mine but borrowed, but the execution, the decisions, some interpretation, they're all mine. So I would love really to hear your thoughts. Would you consider this koi fish piece like it's your own artwork, or is it more of a study? And now water lilies. I will do my best to recreate this nice watercolor effect. We'll see how it goes. And here an incident happened. I've got a phone call and I stopped the recording, of course. Then I started drawing again and I forgot to turn it back on. And now is the most scary part, adding all of those dark and bright colors. Again, not gonna lie, this feels intimidating. At the same time, I'm one of those artists who are not kind of, afraid of adding dark colors and adding shadows. I think I mentioned in one of my previous videos. So, there are those artists who are like kind of hesitant to add shadows. And I'm like, whatever, I'm doing this. I'm really comfortable adding like dark colors, but because I'm trying this for the first time, and this is like violet. I wouldn't expect this color when drawing a fish pond. So I guess this is the combination of unusual color plus how dark it is. And another thing I want to talk about is like, do you have those situations where you really want to draw, but the gap between where your skills are right now and what you imagine in your head, it just, it feels massive. I definitely feel this. And for me, it feels like pretty discouraging. It is pretty discouraging. Oftentimes, instead of of actually drawing, I sometimes just sit there, procrastinating, imagining all the beautiful things I could draw instead of actually doing it. Or I also sometimes end up scrolling for hours, Pinterest or Instagram. Okay, we're going darker. Buckle up. But back to Pinterest. It has an opposite effect on me. I see so much incredible talent and so many amazing artworks, and I start comparing myself to those people, and I definitely feel way behind skill-wise, and sometimes even imagination-wise, and it just drains my motivation. And then I'm sitting there in front of the blank page, super exhausted, but with tons of saved ideas on my Pinterest board. I cannot really imagine. I don't really know how many pictures I have on my Pinterest art board, hundreds, definitely hundreds, a few hundreds. And then I'm sitting there and zero actions. I haven't drawn a single line. And also, I think what makes it a bit difficult with alcohol markers, I've noticed that there are not many books or tutorials or any resources for alcohol markers compared to other more traditional media like colored pencils or watercolor or some paint. And I don't know, maybe that's just my bubble, but whenever I go to bookstores or search online, there is definitely not that much marker specific content. It feels pretty limited. I know about a few artists, professional artists who do alcohol marker courses, but that's just a handful. What I like about this approach is that probably before I wouldn't even think about using purple, this dark purple violet colors to draw a pond, but it actually looks quite good. So I really hope that this, trick of adapting watercolor tutorials to alcohol markers is helpful, especially if you're trying to close, the skills gap and, start moving from tutorials towards your own work. So you still have some support and some, guided materials, but you already are doing your own work and you bring your own imagination, your own talent and skill into that process. So I'm really curious, how do you feel about that? So I'm really curious. I think I made a mistake with the koi fish because typically they have like flatter faces. Can I call it a face? But here is just, it's a different shape. But this was not intentional. That was just, a mistake. I accidentally covered too much with red marker. Okay, and my cat decided to join. And typically, if I make a mistake with any kind of red pigment, I do not try to fix it, because red pigment is like notoriously persistent. Like typically it's very difficult to get rid of it unless I'm covering with even darker, brighter color. I think I'm getting somewhere. I quite like what I see so far, but I definitely need more darker colors. It's a bit intimidating again and scary, but that's a leap of faith. I barely ever use this dark violet color, so I'm really glad that I have this opportunity now. I am being very careful now, and I want to just first start with the corners, because I think if I add too much, it will overpower the fish in the center and also the red color of the fish, and I definitely don't want this. Okay, and I thought that the previous stage was quite intimidating. I think now is the real stress test. I need to add those water ripples on the water, using the darkest violet color. Okay, wish me luck. It's not that I cannot draw symmetrical shapes by hand, but I have this extra pressure when I record the process. And again, I'm not really sitting in a very comfortable position, so typically I also rotate the page just to make my job a bit easier. So it's not perfect, but it's okay. It's okay. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. That would make me extremely happy. And as some final touches, I want to add a bit of like definition using colored pencils. The pencils are not really working that well on this paper because it's just too smooth, but still. I use colored pencils only to add some tiny small details to my marker drawings, but I quite enjoy working with polychromos. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it properly, but they seem like a really fun medium to use. Who knows, maybe one day I will also switch to color pencils, but so far I'm not seeing it happening. I'm so in love with alcohol markers, so I doubt I will switch to anything else. And of course, the highlights, because it's all like in the water, so there should be definitely quite bright highlights. Okay, so the white color pencil isn't bright enough. And I'm gonna use the white jelly pen. Okay, I don't know what's the deal with these, jelly roll pens, or how are they called? I think this is the third one that I purchased, and none of them, literally none of them, work properly. I guess I'm gonna just switch to Posca pen. And I quite like the end result, even though I have to confess the ugly stage was just a bit too long for me in this one. And up until the very end, until I started applying like really dark colors, I wasn't quite sure if this picture gonna make it. Alright, so this is the original artwork, and this is my own interpretation with alcohol markers. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, for being here, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you!